What would you do if you woke up tomorrow and every record of your life had simply vanished? Not stolen, not destroyed, just gone. The way morning fog disappears when the sun hits it. No trace, no proof. Just a memory in your own head and the word of a corporation whose terms of service you never actually read. That is not a thought experiment. That is Tuesday. And here is the dirty secret nobody is telling you. The paperless revolution was never sold to you as a trap. It was sold to you as freedom. Clean desks, lighter wallets, a greener planet. They made it sound like liberation, and you signed up willingly, because who wants a filing cabinet when you can have a cloud? But somewhere between the convenience and the click, something ancient and irreplaceable was quietly taken from you. Your proof of existence, your paper trail, your legacy. This is the story of how that happened. And more importantly, this is the story of who benefits when it does. Let us start with something simple, a piece of paper. Not a metaphor, an actual physical piece of paper. Think about what a single document can do. A birth certificate tells the state you exist. A deed tells the world you own something. A handwritten letter tells your grandchildren who you actually were, not the curated version of you that Instagram decided to preserve, but the real you, the messy and honest and contradictory human being who sat down with a pen and put your actual thoughts onto a surface that will outlast every server farm on Earth. The Library of Congress in Washington holds documents written by Thomas Jefferson. Not scanned copies, not digital files. The actual paper, the actual ink, the actual fingerprints, the actual reality of a human being who has been dead for 200 years. You can look at it. You can feel, if they let you close enough, the weight of it. That paper survived wars, fires, floods, and the collapse of governments. It survived because paper, treated with even minimal care, is one of the most durable information storage technologies ever invented. Now ask yourself this. What survives in 50 years from the emails you sent in 2012? Nothing. Because the servers that stored them were decommissioned, because the company that hosted them pivoted, merged, or went bankrupt, because the file format became obsolete, because nobody paid the subscription renewal, because the algorithm decided your inactive account was clutter, gone. And here is where the story gets darker, because this is not an accident. It never was. Cast your mind back to the 1930s. The American economy has just collapsed. Banks are failing. Bread lines stretch around city blocks in every major city from New York to Chicago to Los Angeles. Men in suits who owned factories last month are selling apples on street corners this month. The whole system has cracked open and everyone can see the machinery inside, and what they see terrifies them. But here is what most people forget about the Great Depression. It was also a golden age of documentation. When the government sent photographers out to record the suffering, they used large format film cameras that produced negatives the size of your hand. Dorothea Lange photographed migrant workers in California. Walker Evans photographed tenant farmers in Alabama. Those images, printed on archival paper and filed in government repositories, are still with us today, in perfect clarity. You can see the lines on a woman's face. You can see the holes in a child's shoes. You can see the exact quality of despair in a man's eyes as he stood in front of a collapsing barn in 1936. Those images are evidence. They are proof that something happened to real people. They cannot be edited. They cannot be deleted by a terms of service update. They exist in the physical world, and the physical world does not have an unsubscribe button. Now compare that to what we are producing today. Every single day, human beings take approximately 1.8 trillion photographs. That is a number so large, it barely means anything. So let us put it another way. Every 2 minutes, humanity captures more images than were taken in the entire 19th century combined. Every event, every meal, every face, every moment of joy or grief or boredom, all of it is being photographed at a rate our ancestors could not have imagined in their most feverish dreams. And almost none of it will survive. Not because people do not care, but because the infrastructure that holds all of it is designed for profit, not preservation. The phones that take those pictures use proprietary file formats. The cloud services that store them operate on subscription models. The platforms that display them are built on advertising revenue, and when the advertising model breaks, as it eventually always does, the platform dies, and everything on it dies with it. MySpace lost 12 years of music in a single server migration in 2019. Not some of it, all of it. 50 million songs, gone overnight. The company issued a brief apology and moved on. The artists whose work vanished had no legal recourse, no backup, no warning. One morning their catalog existed. The next morning, it did not. The statement from the company described it as an unintentional server migration failure, as if those 50 million pieces of human creative work were just a mild inconvenience, a rounding error in a quarterly report. That is what your legacy looks like to a corporation, a rounding error. And this is the mechanism, this is the engine of the quiet tragedy. To understand it fully, you have to go back even further to the moment in history when the relationship between ordinary people and their own records fundamentally changed. Before the 1950s, most Americans kept their important documents at home, in a box under the bed, in a fireproof safe in the basement, in a cedar chest that smelled like your grandmother's house. The original deed to the land, the marriage certificate, yellowed at the edges, the military discharge papers, folded and refolded along the same creases for decades, the family Bible with the births and deaths written in 4 different handwriting styles across 150 years. This was not just sentiment, it was strategy. When your documents lived in your house, the information in them belonged to you in the most absolute sense. Nobody could charge you a monthly fee to access your own birth certificate. Nobody could change the terms of service on your grandmother's letters. Nobody could mine your grandfather's land deed for behavioral data. The documents were yours, fully, completely, without condition. Then came the post-war consumer boom, and with it, a very subtle and very deliberate shift in how institutions began to think about information. The 1950s were when modern corporate record-keeping really took hold in America. Companies were growing fast. They needed systems. They built filing departments, data entry pools, centralized records divisions, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the center of gravity for important information began to shift away from the individual toward the institution. This shift accelerated in the 1960s and 70s with the arrival of mainframe computing. For the first time, it was technically possible to store enormous amounts of data in a centralized location, accessible by the institution, invisible to the individual. Your bank knew more about your financial life than you did, because your bank had the mainframe and you had a little paper passbook that the teller stamped once a month. The passbook, remember the passbook. That small paper record was actually a profound piece of financial technology. It was a physical ledger of your relationship with your bank, held in your hands, updated in your presence, signed or initialed by a human being. It was a contract you could touch. If your bank made an error, you had the passbook. If the bank claimed you owed a fee, you had the passbook. The passbook was your proof, and your proof lived in your pocket. When banks digitized their records and eliminated the passbook, they framed it as progress, faster, more accurate, more convenient. And in many ways, it was. But what nobody said out loud was this. When they eliminated the passbook, they also eliminated your independent verification of the relationship. Now the only record of what your bank owed you was inside the bank's own systems. You were trusting the institution to be honest about a transaction in which the institution had a financial interest in being dishonest. This is not paranoia. This is accounting. And this same logic, this same quiet removal of your ability to independently verify your own reality is exactly what has happened across every domain of modern life: your medical records, your employment history, your tax filings, your contracts, your photographs, your communications. All of it has migrated off your physical possession and into systems owned by someone else, maintained by someone else, governed by terms someone else can change at any time. The paperless office was a slogan invented by a business writer named George Paik in 1975. He worked at Xerox, which is almost too perfect, a paper company evangelizing the end of paper. Paik imagined a future where workers sat at glowing terminals and accessed all their information electronically. He framed this as liberation from drudgery. And the business press loved it, because the business press is primarily in the business of selling business ideas to businesses. What Paik did not discuss, because it probably did not occur to him and because it would not have been good for business if it had, was the question of who would own all that electronic information once it left the filing cabinet. Who would control access to it? Who would profit from it? Who would decide when it was time to delete it? Those questions have answers now, and the answers are not you. Here's how the system actually works in the modern era, stripped of all the marketing language about innovation and efficiency and the future. Every time you stop printing something and start storing it digitally in someone else's system, you are making a trade. You are trading permanence for convenience. You are trading ownership for access. You are trading independence for dependency. The convenience is real and immediate. The cost is abstract and delayed. And human beings are terrible at calculating abstract delayed costs against immediate concrete benefits. The system is built on that weakness. Think about what happened to digital photography. When you shot on film, the negative was yours. It lived in a little yellow box in your closet. Nobody could take it. Nobody could charge you to look at it. Nobody could delete it without physically destroying the object. When you switched to digital, suddenly your photos lived on a memory card, then on a hard drive, then on a platform. And each step of that migration created a new intermediary who now stood between you and your own memories. Google Photos has over 4 billion users. Those users have collectively uploaded more photographs than have been taken in all of human history before the digital age. Google stores those photographs, and in exchange for that storage, Google analyzes those photographs. Google's systems look at your face and the faces of your family, and the places you go, and the products you own, and the events you attend. They build a profile of you that is worth, in aggregate, across all 4 billion users, hundreds of billions of dollars per year in advertising revenue. You are not using Google Photos for free. You are paying with your memories, literally. The raw material of your personal history is being fed into a machine that converts it into money for someone else. And the moment Google decides that business model is no longer profitable, or the moment a more aggressive competitor appears, or the moment a regulatory catastrophe hits the company, your photographs are an expense on their balance sheet, not an asset. Expenses get cut. This is the villain of this story. Not a person, not a conspiracy, a structure, a system of incentives that was built brick by brick across 70 years of technological change and that now controls access to the evidence of your life. And the most insidious part is that the system convinced you to build your own cage. Every time you chose the app over the filing cabinet, the cloud over the hard drive, the email over the letter, you handed another brick to the system. Not because you were foolish, but because the incentives were engineered to make the wrong choice feel like the right choice. That is not stupidity. That is a very sophisticated con. So, what do you do with this? How do you escape a trap that you already walked into willingly? The first thing you need to understand is that this is not about going back to some imaginary, simpler time. Nobody's asking you to burn your smartphone or write letters by candlelight. The digital tools are useful, and they are not going away. The question is about balance. The question is about what you own versus what you access. And that question has a very practical answer. Print things. It sounds almost laughably simple, but this is the radical act in the modern world. Print the photographs that matter. Not all of them. Not the lunch you had on a Tuesday in 2022, but the ones that carry weight, the ones that contain people you love, the ones that record the moments that, 20 years from now, you will want your children to be able to hold in their hands. Get them developed. Put them in an album. Label the back with names and dates, written in a permanent marker, because the future members of your family will not know who is in that photograph unless you tell them. A digital file name that says img_4732.jpg tells your great-grandchildren absolutely nothing. A handwritten note on the back of a print that says, "Your great-grandmother, 1988, the summer she learned to sail," tells them everything. Keep physical copies of your important documents. This is not paranoia. This is basic risk management. Your will, your deed, your insurance policies, your medical records, print them. Keep them somewhere safe. Keep a backup copy somewhere else. Tell someone you trust where they are, because the day you need those documents is always the worst day of your life, and the last thing you need on the worst day of your life is a password reset screen. Write letters. Not because email is evil, but because a handwritten letter is a physical artifact of who you were at a specific moment in time. It carries information that no digital file can replicate. The pressure of the pen, the smudge where your hand rested, the paper you chose, the handwriting that changed as you aged. A letter from your grandmother when she was 30 years old contains 1,000 data points about who she was that never made it into any digital scan. It is irreplaceable in a way that a sent folder is not. Buy a hard drive. Back up your digital files to something physical that you own, not just a cloud. A solid-state drive in your desk drawer that contains your photographs, your documents, your music, something that exists in your physical possession and cannot be deleted by a server migration or a corporate bankruptcy or a terms of service update. And more than any of this, understand the deeper principle at work. The things that matter most in your life deserve to exist in the physical world. Because the physical world is honest in a way that the digital world is not. A photograph in your hand is exactly what it appears to be. A file on a server is a permission slip that someone else is letting you borrow. Your legacy is not a subscription. It is not a license. It is not a terms of service agreement subject to change at any time without notice. Your legacy is the accumulation of a human life, a real life, lived in the real world with real people who loved you and real moments that shaped who you were and who came after you. That life deserves to be recorded in something that does not require a password, something that does not need a connectivity plan, something that a child can pick up in 70 years and hold and understand without any software at all. The system will keep telling you that paper is inefficient, that physical is inconvenient, that printing is wasteful. The system will keep pointing you toward the cloud, the app, the platform, the service, because every time you accept that direction, you hand your legacy to a corporation and trust them to care for it as much as you do. They do not. They never have, and they never will. The only person who will ever care about your legacy as much as you do is you. So act like it. Print the photograph, write the letter, keep the document, hold the thing. Because the quiet tragedy is not that the world went paperless. The quiet tragedy is that it went paperless, one convenient click at a time. And nobody noticed what was being lost until they tried to find it. And the server was already gone, and the company was already acquired, and the account was already deleted, and the photograph was already nowhere, and the child was already asking where grandma's pictures were, and the answer, the only honest answer, was that they existed somewhere on a machine owned by a company that no longer exists, in a format that no current device can read, behind a password that nobody remembered, on a server that was decommissioned in a building that is now a data center for a different company. And all of it, every single pixel of it, is gone. That is the world we built. We can still choose to build a different one.